Okay. Would you believe I have, after 12 hours of travel, I have spent the night in a museum? It looks adventurous. It wasn't. It was just a good place to be, as you perfectly know. Now, we'll hurry up because, however the time given to me is generous, we shouldn't lose it. I was told to start like this. So, Christians, you probably know even the painting. And you know what it describes. It describes our urge to have it palpable and accessible to our senses, not only to our mind. And I believe this very notion will color the theme of today, in whichever way. Museums. There are many Christians on all sides of the world. Some of them in Indonesia have taken up Christianity but remained what they are, in fact. And they, Torah people, they still cherish the memories of their late in this way, with the images, but not only with the images. And you will see that it actually rings a bell. We have the fascination with the past. They do it in a very direct way. Anthropologists would know it good enough. Am I on your way? I'm sorry, I have to change the slides. Or may I probably adjust to do it this way? No, you're the loser. I'm sorry. So, what they do even is, no, I'm the loser. I hear myself so much. What they do, going directly into this relationship with the past, is really going very far. But it's still us, in a sense. We are, as well as they are, rather eager to be in a close touch with the past, sometimes too close. This is just 50 or 70 years ago, Sicily, and a known case because of well-preserved, embalmed body of a child. And it's one of the wonders of Italy, but again, nothing so very special. Be sure that the data is correct. We spent 4 million liters of formaldehyde to still do all sorts of embalming right now in this very civilization in Europe. So it's not something which is beyond our usual behavior or reasoning. And you may ask yourself, is it not that Aborigines have in some way a more spiritual approach to the past, with less attachment to the physicality of it? And indeed, they do. In fact, it's all about the notions of time. Aborigines do not know what past is because they live a continuity of time in which past does not count. It's just a continuity comprising the past. And, well, we may reflect upon that as also an advantage. But this is the way we prefer. We fix the time, we measure, we quantify, we fix it in materials, and, well, of course, we have an opportunity to question these ways and see how far we can balance the possibilities between this extreme and some others, as I will imply them or show them. Now, it was told that my dear colleague from ICOM reminded me that I was also very much ICOM person, and I'm still such. At ICOM, at the time, we had it all clear. It's not anymore. A collection in museums is all important. Many would like it that way still. Collection is the predominant reason for many museums' existence. Another very, very important author. And then museums have to concentrate upon collections. Jeffrey Lewis, my career in ICOM Executive Council, that's him. This is how I was raised. There is no museum without collection. And then, again, Neil Costans, somebody that you all know quite well, and a very accountable person, he says the lifeblood of museums is in their collections. The museum, if it's not a collection, is nothing. Whew. And he is a prominent figure. So if we trust them, then there will be no sitting here and no discussion, because they are very clear. Collection is everything. I don't think so. And you will not probably think so, because there's a certain balance. We live in a flux reality, and things are not simple, and certainly do not find themselves on either of the extremes, because the truth has never resided in any of the extremes anyhow. So why should this one do so? There are always early thinkers. There are always persons that know in advance what will encounter us as a problem. One of them, a brilliant mind from the States, from the 20s, did say in one of his little booklets, now it's re-edited, objects do not make a museum, they merely form a collection. And my goodness, it's so incredibly important. Because when you read everything that's written, you will then know that what he meant was much more than that. He said actually that a collection is means to something. And also implied that a museum by itself is not, there is not only a collection, it's also by itself a means to something. So what he implied was much more. Actually, not denying that the collection is important, he said collection and the museum are there for some other reasons beyond themselves. So we'll try to explore them. As I travel sometimes too much, I encounter rather different experiences. This has not been written by a museum person. On one of my travels in Israel, on a kibbutz, a little museum, I see this written on the wall, because somebody who was constructing a museum wanted to make sure that how short he will fall in front of this huge, impossible task. And he said, in this place, seek and look for what can be seen no more, hear voices that can be heard no more, understand what is beyond all understanding. Now, in frankness, you would say, why would then there be a museum at all? Because you can't do anything. We try, we always try. The past is lost, will be lost, will stay lost, and all we can do is to retrieve some from it. And then some may mean anything you choose it to be. It is the famous word selection that you actually have as a motto of your entire professional life. Who selects, why, how, for whom? I'm speaking the truth. This is what, when somebody sneezes and you speak something, in my country they say, it's true. It's true what has been said. Now I really believe it is. Another, that was Caravaggio, and this is Rubens. Now it's a huge theme. I really like to invent things, and well, basically we are about memory. And memory is stored in so many places. And later on, maybe I will go closer to that to mention that we actually dispose with a problem as wide as the world, which is mnemotechnics of reality. Many times it was stored, the memory was stored in paintings. And why on earth would Rubens think of painting such a scene? It wasn't his grandmother, it wasn't, this boy is not his nephew, it's an invented scene. He wanted to convey something to us which is very important. My claim is he depicted, in fact, something which is a transfer of collective experience. Museums existed forever, since we existed, because this existed. There existed the source, and there existed the need. Look at this regard, an expectation, and of course there was a process. And this is what you do in your museums if you do it correctly. This transfer of experience, this lighting the candle of somebody wishing to go on with what? And that's the question. That's why selection is so important. But I would say it's about wisdom, not knowledge, and that's huge advance. Because knowledge is not enough. They tell you, I'm sure they tell you here in this country, our goal is, political persons, our goal is a knowledge society. You already live in a knowledge society. You actually, you are drowned in the oceans of knowledge. What you lack is wisdom. What everybody lacks is wisdom, and that is filtered, responsible, ethical knowledge, and that's another thing. Now, here it is. And of course, this here shortened whatever anagram is public memory institutions. And you will see that if we limit our problems to museums, we will get a rather limited picture which will not answer the entire question which is beyond. You can apply it to any institution, but you have to have the question, the big question over there, posed in the correct way. Pose it in the way of memory, pose it in the way of to what ways it may serve in the society. I have been contributing to definitions of museums a few times in my life, always out of frustration like many others, and indeed it is almost impossible in all frankness to offer a definitive and exact definition of museums. I would say what you can offer is a flux definition, a sort of a current definition, a definition which comprises changes. And in this case, which is Nationalsozialismus Dokumentationszentrum in Köln, in Cologne, LD, you have an institution which is there, of course, serves perfect purpose, but what is it? Depends how you will classify it administratively. Otherwise, it wouldn't help to see the contents, because it's a museum, it's an archive, it's an exhibition center, it's an action center in the sense of civil action, and it's also what else? Archive, I did say, and it's a spot of memory as well, because this is the place where Gestapo was centered in Cologne when it was over there, and in the basement there are still torture rooms for the prisoners. So it's so many things. And as you can see, there aren't many objects around, except the place, hardly anything. But it's such a dense atmosphere, and it's such an effective museum that you say, well, how come that the impact is so great when there are no real museum objects? Well, because it's not only about objects. You can construct museums with through the 350 million euros in a prestigious city and still do it in an old way. Kenneth Hudson, whom I profited from as a mentor, God bless his soul, would say an old museum done in a new way. So would imply actually you can have all the technology and the money in the world, but if you don't change this mindset, the worldview, the approach, then you end up with a brand new museum with all ways of thinking, which is wasted money in many ways. It's a nice museum, okay, but it's still exotic culture being shown to the Westerners and nothing much more. Believe me, no man from Tahiti or Benin or any place will find themselves at home here in this museum, and I would say that was the big idea. Then objects, of course, are here confined in a prison, not really doing what they should do. Another museum which is so much beloved by the masses, and unfortunately a bad museum, but a case by itself. Again, place used for the museum, a former a railway station, but then misused in many other ways. And of course, very much object-centered, and indeed, you can even ask, what was the choice behind? What was the big agenda, cultural agenda behind? Because l'art des papiers and all the 19th century exposed in such a way with Impressionists on the 5th floor. Is this the collage that we wanted to convey to the others, using the objects? Well, in which way? It's always the mind behind that decides upon the quality of it. Now, you know the museum, and you know that it's called in literature Effet Bilbao. I use it very often because I know the project very, very well. And I use it actually to say that a museum can earn money, and really it can. But this is a rather exceptional problem. And again, it's the collection-based museum which actually owes its importance not only to its collection and its exhibitions, but to the very fact of being what it is. With the architecture, with the brave cultural project installing this institution, representative international institution, in a dying city and revitalizing the city completely. I have witnessed that, and it's a little marvel. No, it's a big marvel. And approaching the theme again from the other side, what you have here is what happened. And then, what about our theme, museum objects? Well, they are here. This is museum, and these are museum objects. What I'm trying to do is suggesting the vast category of whatever museum object or the object of museum can be. This is one of the last rooms of Immigrants Museum in Bremerhaven in Germany, which is basically informatic data. So you go into the files and try to find how many of your own ancestors have gone from there to the States in 19th century or whenever. It doesn't look like a museum, and it's very much a museum. I doubt they have actually any, oh yes, maybe a few hundreds original objects among thousands or tens of thousands. Now, if I say open library with this explanation over there, you would probably have right to say, why do you mention library here? Because we're talking about museums. I'm just trying to say that we are merging, we are actually witnessing a huge convergence of institutions upon what? Upon the notion of memory, upon the need of public memory. We actually are part of the process which was created by information and communication technology, by the fact that we are talking more and more about institutions which are user-oriented, and then also institutions which comply very, very well between themselves as when it comes to the mission in the society. A good library, a good archive, a good museum would basically have the same mission in the society. Very simply, very unprofessionally, how to make the world better from their side with their means. Now, there are many things of the sort, even globally. So the memory of the world is just that. It's not only e-heritage, but it's also the living heritage treasures. We have even people who are museum objects by themselves, a carrier of experiences. They will die soon. Hopefully, they will make the transfer. Remember the transfer? they will make the transfer and continue to live. But this is it. This is us. We are actually the means or the institutions of transforming, of transgression into another reality. We have created, in fact, without knowing with so many other agencies, we have created a layer around the globe which is a manosphere, which is literally, I have tried to explain it here in brief, a global memory environment consisting of man-made electric impulses, social actions, a pulsating shell of a giant, still primitive, but hypermnesic brain. What we are often fascinated with is that this brain is hypermnesic. But this is a dangerous thing, actually. It means that it remembers everything. It's like in Rain Man. You remember the film? The problem is when you remember everything. What is the opposite? The creative process of remembering selected knowledge. Now, why and how, with what arguments? We are now with this giant primitive brain that remembers everything. This is why we have this impression, oh, we are an advanced society. No, in fact, we are more stupid than before. But we have a huge memory and often useless. What we need is a memory which is reduced to wisdom, to the usable memory, to the memory that really makes our lives better, productive, or in any way more noble. Don't forget the grand scene. You may work in a museum. God bless you, because I think it's the best work in the world. But don't forget that archives, monuments inside, knowledge bases, networks, digitally born systems, if they concern museums or memory, privately owned heritage, now you've got it. This was done in '96 when not many private museums were around. And living heritage and libraries, they are all the same. They have the same problem, and that is collecting and caring and distributing or communicating the information. Which information? That's the problem we're talking about. Now, about objects. Of course, you know, I'm not trying to make fun of the very serious theme, but this is how museums started. If you look up in the relatively short, brief museum history, it's Barnum that we started with in the States. But museum idea is not something else, but the reality is this. This is existing. This is in wherever, Ripley Museum, somewhere in Brussels, I think. The man with the longest nose, of course, they didn't embalm him, but then the calf, and then the medicine of Elvis Presley, and so on and so on. But in very serious institutions, we still have sort of hidden pockets of fascination with ultimate reality. This man was a philosopher, social reformer, and you must have heard of him. He's Jeremy Bentham, famous Englishman. But he was also rather eccentric, as many English people are, and in a good way. But still curiously, he got himself stuffed after his death, and here he is, in all his appearance, sitting in a lobby of a museum in London. You can see him. When you come to London, you can see him in the University College of London. But then again, what I wanted to say, there's a fascination, it's still with us, but then also, what is the real reality of the object? He had his original head, but then it didn't work. So they put, this is the wax one, and they put this head down, which is embalmed, embalmed head. Can I point it? Yes. Embalmed head, and then everybody said it was disgusting. So why not doing this presentation? The problem is, of course, the head is not entirely the same. neither is the cloth, neither is the position. The head is in the collection of the museum. So what is the reality we are talking about? Even when a bizarre thing like this, you know, depending upon some bequest of an individual is in concern, it's a different reality depending upon the people who handle it. So even physical reality changes. Reality can be many things, as you know. Art museums, especially contemporary art museums, are a very special case. Actually, most of the rules that you apply to museums, other museums, do not function with contemporary art museums, because these are only museums about present. All other museums are either about the past, or if Disney Corporation does them, they are about the future. Very curious and very important when we go on discussing the matter. Now, talking about you Christians, me, former Christian, or still culturally Christian, what is this that we do to the reality, or to how would I say, to the concept? Because you would agree that this man existed, most probably existed, and you know much better than me probably his words and the epiphany he has brought to this world and so on. So no offense, just the contrary. I think it's so incredibly important. But how do you preserve words? And would you preserve it in a good way? I think preserving words may happen in a very, you know, different, noble ways. And look with me and check for yourself whether this was the noblest way of recording his words. Would you see the difference? Would Christ really sign and say, this is the epiphany I was telling you about? We are barbarians, you see. It's Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana. I was recently there to check if I can tell you the story. And then, you know about brave Scots. At Culloden, I think I pronounced it correctly, in 18th century, they have lost the last battle with English. Then recently they had an opportunity to make up for it, but they didn't. So it's a good thing to know, by the way, you know, how long the hatred or whatever the opposition perpetuates. This is a sort of a documentary image of whatever happened in that battle. Now, we're not really happy with that. We want more, and we constructed a museum over there. So it's a museum on the battlefield. We actually recognize the fact that it is not the truth. It is actually the magic of the place. It's a genius loci that attracts us. There's practically nothing over there except grass. But then something other, which is actually of blood. Whether you like it or not, whether you ignore it or not, whether you enjoy your isolation in your museums, this is reality. People don't care about your museums sometimes because they like to live by museums. And this is not a painting, this is not a movie even. It's every year a Battle of Culloden being reenacted. And this man here is probably a local barber, and this man here, looking horrible, look at him, he's probably a grocer. They prepare the entire year to be horrible. And one day, and to show to the English, you know, how terrible burgers the Scots can be. And well, ladies will say, well, all men are like that, you know. They're just, so you're right, by the way. But this is true, and this is how far museum object notion can go into living the museum object. And curiously enough, as we are actually medievalizing ourselves as societies, it is happening that in spite of all your effort in natural history museums, in all the scientific publications and researches, we go back and we have, in this case, a creation museum, which is one of those museums, this one in the States, telling all and everybody over there that the world is 6,000 years old. That before 6,000 years back, there was nothing. And they don't have objects, but of course they have. And they have huge visiting all the time. And they're multiplying. So think what we should do and how should we attract people, because there are so many that believe indeed that we are a force. This is a solid, very solid museum, like museum obviously, institution. So to think that this museum, in this case, Museum of Jewish Diaspora in Tel Aviv, has no single original object is rather curious, you see. But the fact is, they have been planned for 20 years. Museum people had terrible trouble to accept them in the Association of Museums because they said, we don't want them, because they don't have really original objects. Finally, they were accepted. They are one of the flagships of museum field of Israel, of the State of Israel, and a renowned museum. And yet, this is a plastic cast, this is a model, this is another model, this is another model, this is an exhibition without any original object. Just an information space. And yet, what do we talk about? We talk about that lady. We talk about the transfer experience. How will it happen? Well, in many ways. With original objects, good. Without them, it could be good. Or good enough. Now, the traumatic past. Museum of Terror in Budapest. And this is the horrible part. The documentation about people that lost their freedom. And this is NKVD and their files with the destinies inside. Now, it's a museum, obviously, and this is horrible. You see, those files are full. They are not full, they're empty. There are no files, in fact, at all. They're just the fronts. Because what they want is the effect. They didn't care to really bring the originals. Originals stayed in the archive. So, is it less wealth? I don't know, maybe yes, you say. But I would say the message was hitting the destination, they got it across, so it's okay. And now, anthropologists, if you expose these two sticks in your museum, what will you achieve? Probably nothing, nobody will see it. And then what do you do with media, with photos and so on? This is a banal detail. It's force feeding in Mauritania. In some countries, ladies are beautiful if they are fat. They can get fat if they eat more than necessary. To eat more than necessary, it's not easy as it may look. So if you eat more, you have this natural urge to throw up. So use this mother uses these sticks to produce pain. And every time the girl has this urge to throw up, she produces the pain. Horrible. So much about the human nature and human cultures. But do you show it? Yes, why shouldn't you? Especially in the Museum of Freedom or a museum of whatever we will invent afterwards. But then, yes, only the media, only the film, only the photo shows what it's all about. And it should show, certainly. This is what science gave us. The archaeologist found out this mummified body, and this is the head of it, and it is supposed to be a deity, a pharaoh which has been conveying to the world, to the posterity, this image, to the gods and to the others. This is what I am, the picture of my greatness and the picture of my soul. But again, there are different pictures. This is the picture that was circulated in his time to the population of Egypt. This is how the population of Egypt should have remembered Tutankhamun. This is what scientists found out how he really looked like, or may have looked like, by using all the scanners, by using all the techniques possible to imagine it. Now, where is the object? Which one is the object? Or is it the accumulation of all? This is the new try of seeing how he might have looked. Seemingly, that's the correct one, because now we have more and more technology on disposal. And indeed, no museum object, be it original or any other, will show us how he really looked. It's really a macabre sort of thing, but again, you know, it's nice to see how this poor creature, crippled and in such a poor state of health as he was, looked like when he was really King God. Only with the technology, with the new media, we are able to do so. With the introduction of intangible heritage, we'll tell more about it later on. We are forced to admit that not many things can be recorded, real things, with real objects, you know. In Austria, is it the sound that you will find in the museum? Probably not. Just a revolver, you know, and it's not enough. Or will it be the smell and the noise in Zamora on the holy local saint procession, or whatever will you be able to transfer, or with some maintenance in Amazon, or at the main square in Krakow, heritage being played for the tourists, or the man who is economisé in Canada, who is really practicing his heritage, retaining it the best possible way, or the frontier between Pakistan and India, where this ceremony of the gods, or this ceremony of the tea, or monks. How will you record it in your museum? Usually void of any action, of any smell, of any noise, of any reality, in fact, the one that you are after. And so many things are happening around us which are actually a world which is in a way unpalpable, which is evasive. And this is one of the examples, Europeana, which is actually another convergence place of everything we do. And then there are many who would see the same problem from different place and different eyes. They wouldn't talk about this particular author and the group around him who talks about memory institutions. I actually think that they are perfectly right. And they talk about memory resources, and then they say, look, database, artifact, document, newsgroup, mailing list, learning environment, everything can be a museum object, even if you can touch it, or if you cannot touch it. And then he says, even the collections are resources in themselves. They contain resources. So it's a translation, how would I say, not being fascinated by collections, but looking at it in a much wider scope. I will tell you more about it later on. Of course, digitized or born digital is much complementary, and what do you do about that? Because there are certain things which do not exist anywhere else. I'm aware that this may produce this sort of evasive reality which you cannot see or cannot grasp, may produce even problems like this. This young little kitten has got it wrong, because born in this digitalized world, she couldn't make the difference between the mouse and the real one. Now, it may happen to us as well. I'm talking usually about many things, but among them is a curious convergence, collecting, care, and communication. What is happening here? I will not go into the details. I will just tell you, curiously enough, archives, museums, libraries, and many other institutions are actually about collecting, about care, about communication. Look at the breakup of their duties. Usually 90% the same. It's just the contents that differs. You know, paper here, stone there, that over here, and something else elsewhere. But the problem is, it will be rising importance of communication that will decide. Saying that, I'm aware that some of you will say, oh, come on, don't go too far. I will not. Communication will be the touchstone. It will decide, you see, because finally it's about the effort, what you want to produce about the communication, and then go back to decide what do you need to do so, to produce those effects. So let's go further on. Can theory help? If you ask me about museology, I think not. Theory cannot help, especially if you explain it like this. And as you know, most of the professors are really too smart to be understandable, and their theories usually make things more blurred up, less clear than what it was before their help. So, as museology, as far as museology, may I just say, how can you have a science of a museum institution? Do you know any other case of a science which is attached to an institution? No, don't try it. There is no science that is attached to an institution. Otherwise, then the science about the process in schools would be called schoolology, or the one connected to the churches would be churchology, which does not exist because it's connected to the concept. And the concept is something that we are after. What is the concept in church? Okay, God, and then it's theology. What is the other thing in the schools? This is why it's pedagogy. And here, what do we conclude? 25 years ago, I concluded it must be heritology, my goodness, because heritage is in the center. Then I moved on because one should always provoke, you see, and then make people think. This I didn't quote because I found it a few days ago in my notes, and I said, goodness, I put it over there. I don't know even the source, so I'll go back immediately when I come back. But look what this man is suggesting. I know it's man because the note says, but look, he's talking about culture. And when talking about culture, he doesn't actually have museums on his mind, which is very important. He talks about this inner part, which is hidden feelings of culture. He says, you cannot touch it, you know, it's evasive. And then goes to say, outer rings are the visible signs of culture. And look at this, artifacts. Artifacts just at the edge of the whole scheme. What he tries to suggest is that the most important things in life cannot be touched, cannot be felt. They are not three-dimensional. Any better example? Love? Not really. Public memory institutions are not about preserving the past. They're about change and continuity. Change because you have to assume it, you have to oppose it, you have to adapt to it, and so on. So you have to know where you live, what the process is, and the continuity of what? Of that deserves continuity. So there's a constant evaluation process. So you evaluate your objects in the sense of what deserves to be continued. And all the rest is circumstance or means towards it. Well, of course, I apologize. Any professor of heritology or mnemosophy, as I provoke in the last 20 years, no, 18 or whatever, is a geek. So, you know, take me as I am. I try to be disciplined, but it's not always easy. That's me, that's my picture. I found it. And I'm quite happy with it because I think we are centrally positioned in the society. You see, it's so important to be in charge of public memory. And that is the issue. Because if you take it that way, then you say, my goodness, we are very important. And what importance means? It means many things. It means that we would probably be very wise to establish a heritage system as a network. Public plus private today. Because if they are so much about memory, let them be part of the scheme. Just, you know, to make it work together. Like this, giving a loan to institutions, individuals, and communities. You know, you have the psychology now, which is my museum, my collection, and so on. Why on earth? Because it's ours, it's public. How can you say mine? And why shouldn't you go and loan it to the others and to the individuals? Individuals? Yes, but it's done. In Central Museum in Utrecht, it's done. You can go over there and say, I would like to have this painting, probably not from the permanent exhibition, I would like to have this painting at home for a month. And you can loan it for a month. Which is the good way of spreading the museum. And of course, to communities and so on. How many, I've been in the jury for the Best Museum of the Year of Europe, and you go to the storages and you see, oh my goodness, what a richness, and it will never come out. Never. Why shouldn't you circulate it? Now, giving back to cultures, places, institutions. If you know that this comes from the first school in the region where the man is the founder, why is his bust in the basement, in the storage? Give it back to the school. They say, but it's better preserved here. So what? If the nose falls off, we'll make another nose. But kids will enjoy the sculpture, the meaning of it. Then mission. We are about value systems, you see. We are not about class. We are not about objects. We are about value system. We use objects to illustrate value systems, identity, and we are about the social project. It's a big thing. We'll come back to it later. If we are such, if we are so important, as the geek says, then we would probably have a bigger place in the society. And you know why museums are not really called upon when there's a strategy being done in Latvia on the development of the society for the next decade? Because they are not a profession, they are occupation. Because if we would form a profession, then we would probably count. And then the minister would call upon us and say, what do you, as public memory sector, advise us to do for the next decade? As you know, this way does not work well for us, neither for the society, because museums and the heritage are usually not mentioned in the strategic documents. And this is why you have less and less money. Of course, because you're not regarded as important. You're not a profession. And this is usually my big theme, so I stop here. Reaffirmation of heritage as public wisdom, domain, interest, strategy, and so on. Well, let's move. By the way, this is a museum object by itself, and I couldn't resist even in the plane when I was getting rid of all the slides. It is rented out, can you believe? Daily, if there's a need. This group over there is Porsche party. Whew. So think hard. Are we about objects or are we about bigger things, using objects, of course? And then, of course, something which I would like to defend another time in some other place when we talk about it. There is nothing so practical as the good theory. Believe me, if taken that way, it's not me who said that. Quite a genius did say that a long time ago. It is true. Believe me, theorizing is not a sin. Since I know something about carpentry, would you believe? Yes. I know that there's theory of carpentry as well. So there's theory everywhere. You start by theory or you start by practice, it's always the circle. Now a few more slides and off you go. Our first duty for our users is very simple. You have seen it so many times, you have probably missed the opportunity so many times to tell people you are here. Remember coming to Rome or some places where you have huge model of a big destroyed city, and then you say, my goodness, what a power, what a nice set of buildings and everything, and nobody tells you you are here. And you'd like to know, in which part am I now, right now? And likewise in life, people actually expect from you to tell them, to explain to them where they were, where they are right now. If you can, I think you will be more important to them. Let me quote another person whom I like, Bertrand Russell, who said, to understand actual world as it is, not as we should wish it to be, is the beginning of wisdom. And we are about wisdom. Believe me, yes, the world is changing. How do you like this? It struck me, all of a sudden, you know, there's somebody else selling another revolution. Money, money at any rate, money, and it's going to end tragically, I can tell you, as the first one. It's not the way. Remember because you see what is happening to us. Homeless. This is how they deal with them in London. Is that if there's a place where a homeless person would sleep, they do this to prevent them. Is this the civilization in which we would like to live? I was in London first time in '66, fascinated by Beatles and whatever it was, 60s as you know. We would never allow it. This was different, better world. The horrible thing is that this world is worse. Is it normal? I don't think so. What have we done to make it different? And it doesn't concern you, but ask Italians. If you only take, endlessly take and plunder the others, this is what happens to you. So you will say, why do you bring it to us? You see, it doesn't concern us. I say, just to remind you that these are your problems. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Because people need solutions, and they don't like to see this. And come to Italy, and you will see them on the streets. And this, I'm not offending anybody. I'm just saying it's really horribly wrong. After such an experience that we have, it's a drafting a young soldier. And you see what is wrong with this? This medical military doctor is examining his lungs. What is the problem? He should be examining his head. And I'm not offending anybody because I don't know where this slide comes from. It's stolen from the internet. I'm glad I don't know. But is it probably of this emptiness? Emptiness of identity? Because this is not London. This is an idyllic old town near Zagreb. If you say tradition, that's the one. And what is Croatian tradition? Still actual. An old mixed pub. It's Croatia because we are being acculturated. Our culture is diminishing, and another one is setting in. So, how do you feel? You feel nervous about it. You feel neurotic, and maybe it is because of that we in Croatia have this on the stadium as fans. When they get mad, with neurosis in their head, this is what they show. I can criticize my own country. I suppose you're allowed. And I'm ashamed. And I'm asking myself, what were we doing in the meantime? Explaining to them what? I think we are in the age of the great greed, the neoliberal paradise that turns humans into insecure addicts of illusions who fly from freedom, fly from reality and fall prey to collective hysteria. And this is what we are dealing with. Now you say, okay, preacher, good, so what do we have to do with this? I have my own collection of votive figures of this and that, you know. I'm sorry, but if you cannot really answer to the world, you know, who pays you and why? And probably one day you will understand that my talking was in time, because they will tell you, we're not interested to pay, close down. Which is exactly what is happening now in UK. I was talking a few days ago with a man who was telling me absolutely abominable things about museums being literally sold out and closed. The curious thing is, in most communities we don't need a museum, but heritage action, a counteractive, scientific-based strategy to fight the threats, to oppose some changes, to adapt to others. In brief, we are there not as the only actor, but part of the mechanisms of the society who will work on criteria and value judgments. Public memory institutions are a value system management business. Retain this and check for yourself in 10 years' time if this will not be the real definition of what we do. I think it will, this way or another. Value system management business, because we'll talk about value systems and how to work, how to live, survive. Now, nearing the end, another cartoon. I hope you agree with the basics of it, with the basic message of it. Why do I propose it to you? What objects is my question? What objects will you need when taking up any of these three themes? I'd like our museums to make exhibition on fear, exhibition on ignorance, an exhibition on hate, an exhibition on pain, an exhibition, now I'm quoting exhibitions that really happened with some of my advanced colleagues. And they were successful because they were talking to people about subjects that they understand, that actually form part of their own trauma. Because it's not easy to be living in this world. Now, I will go to this quickly because civic and social literacy is what we have to create as a possibility in our museums. To have own peace, not imposed peace. And to have real democracy, not this pretense of democracy. Because you don't have, or in most countries, you don't dispose with objective, unbiased information to be part of the democratic process. It's all manipulated by huge media, there's huge planetary interests, by geostrategical interests, and so on. So let's face the truth, we don't have democracy. Well, you live in a relatively prosperous country, you don't feel it in that. So, is your concern limited to your country and to your museum? Well, good for you if it is. We're talking about the world, and you will feel the problems of the rest if we don't really see this as a problem and do something about it. I like this down, sorry. What we actually talk is societal project and social contract. And of course, you know, an invention of mine. And no, go back please to Rousseau and see what this man from so many centuries ago tells you about social contract. This is it. You are suffering because the social contract does not comprise you. It doesn't say social memory, public memory is important. So in social contract you don't exist. In my country what happened was that from 1% with the crisis rising, from 1% of GDP we have fallen in culture to 0.49. What will happen tomorrow to you? I don't know. Maybe you will be wise Latvians, so nothing of the sort will happen. But we're talking again about problems of profession, of science and so on. They're not limited to certain cities or countries or certain occupations. And conclusion, I suppose I'm not too late. Pens and writing survive typing machines and computers, so there will be always museum objects. Mnemotechnics of reality survives. Like I showed you with the paintings and everything, we need objects, we need places. Fetishism is unavoidable. Even I can feel the zest of touching the walking stick of Einstein, you know. I cannot resist. Maximizing resource capacity is the must. Of course, if you have a real object, like the mummy of the Tutankhamun, it will tell you still another layer of a possible story. Of course, material evidence is deemed superior to any, even in the court, even in our situation, our civilization and the culture. That's the fact. Physicality expresses best human need for security. Yes, we are insecure, we like to touch things, and this is how we feel happy or happier. Collection as asset will continue to feed public memory institutions. We live in a greedy world. The new rich in China have now amounted to 500 private museums. There will, sooner or later, some of them will become public museums. And then these answers we have dealt with, so I will go further on and end up that communication, again, will decide upon so many things. This is reality, and this is science. Because this is how they explain it to me. And this is second meal. This is third, and this is dessert. So, have a good appetite. The problem is, the National Museum does not mention the food, let alone the difference between the real food and the GMO. Do you have anything about Latvian food in National Museum? No, because it's not such a subject. Why would you? Oh, it's a big part of everyday life for every people that you know, yourself included. So when poets describe my meal, I get hungry. And this is why we have to have poets in the museum, and why we have to be poets ourselves. Heritage was always one. I always thought that, others, I believe, as well. Intangible, oh, yes, some heritage indeed can be presented as materials into 3D, palpable, physical objects, whereas the other remains physically elusive. That's all we can say. But heritage is so many other things. And then again, we should have this need to touch and to check again, like Thomas, is it real? Is it really the one? And in one future, in a very subtle way, not physical so much, but by credibility, reliability, truth, and the honesty, we should be, and please try to stay such, we should be the touchstones of the society. We will probably remain the only institutions that will be credible. You cannot trust politicians, you cannot trust corporations, you cannot trust anybody, in fact, military sector, God forbid. So who can you trust? Your priests? I don't in my country. So whom do you trust? You trust to your museums, you trust to your archives, to your libraries. Please stay such and with such relevance, because we will need you. And ending up with Camus, with his call, yes, I agree with him, rebellious man, finally, and yes, world can be changed, I'm sure, because this is what it seems to be like impossible. We can change the world. Of course, this is some of the marketing at the end. I have written a book on marketing, so I will ask you to accept my apologies. The dates are over there, and this is it. Thank you very much.